Hey everybody, Mike here with Delta Faucet. In this video, I'm going to walk you through some common troubleshooting tips for both the Clarifi High Flow Water Filtration System and the Clarifi 2-Stage Advanced Water Filtration System. As with any household system, issues can arise from time to time, but most are easy to identify and resolve. Now, whether you're noticing reduced water flow, unusual taste, or just want to make sure your system's running the way it should, I'll cover the most common issues and how to solve them. And if you need help with the installation or changing your filters, don't worry, we have separate videos that walk you through those steps as well. Okay, let's dive in and get your system back to performing at its best. If you're experiencing low flow from your filtration system, here's a few troubleshooting tips you can try. First, we want to double check the flow rate that you're getting from the faucet. So if you have the high flow, high capacity system, we're going to turn your faucet handles to the full on position and then go slowly back and forth from full hot to full cold. Now, if you're seeing the same flow rate from the full hot to the full cold sides, then we can be confident that that issue probably lies somewhere within the faucet itself and not the filtration system. Now, if you do notice a significant change in the flow rate from going from the full hot to the full cold sides on your faucet, then the issue may lie within the filtration system and we can continue troubleshooting from there. Now, one thing I want to point out is that if you have the 2-stage system at home, like I have here, just be aware that that flow rate is significantly less than you'll see from your normal faucet. That flow rate's generally about 1.5 quarts every minute. So if you have a container, you can test that to see if you're getting about the right flow rate. Now, if all those things look good, the next thing we want to check is the faucets themselves. Check your aerator if your faucet has one. Go ahead and pull it off and check the screen for any debris that may be causing the flow issue, and then reinstall and recheck the flow rate. If everything up top looks good and you still have the flow issue, let's move underneath the sink for some additional troubleshooting steps. Now, the first thing I want to check is the rest of my faucet system, because a lot of faucets may have an additional restrictor or screen within their spray wand hose or inlet hose. Just want to check those to make sure that all those screens also are free from debris. The next thing we want to check is to visually inspect our filtration system. So the first thing I want to look for is making sure that my supply stops, both the hot and the cold, are in the full on position. Next, I'm going to visually inspect all of my tubes connecting my filtration system, making sure that my inlet tube isn't kinked or pinched in any spots that could be causing the issue, as well as my outlet tube. And also give a quick visual inspection of all the other tubes under here that run to your faucet. If all of those look good and you still have the flow issue, the next thing to check will be our filters. What we're going to be doing is basically removing the filters to visually inspect them. So the first thing we're going to do is turn off both of the hot and the cold supply stops and make sure our faucet is in the full on position. This will help stop the flow of water and also remove any residual pressure that may be trapped within our system. Once I've done that, I can remove the filter cartridge or cartridges to visually inspect them, making sure that I don't see any debris that could be stuck in either one of the outlet or inlet ports, and also that the O-rings look like they're in the correct positions. Now that we have those filter cartridges reinstalled, I can turn on both my hot and my cold supply stops and check the flow of water to see if it's returned to normal. If I'm still experiencing low flow, I want to isolate the flow of water running through the filtration system without running it through the faucet. So to do this, I'm going to turn off both the hot and the cold supply stops, and then I'm going to disconnect the outlet tube from my filtration system that's supplying my faucet. Now, depending on how you have this hooked up, you may be able to just disconnect a union between the two. However, if you're like me, in my situation here, where I have one continuous tube that's connected from my filtration system and is supplying my beverage faucet, keep in mind you may need an extra length of tubing for this next step. Now, what we're going to do is basically direct that outlet tube from the filtration system directly into a bucket. Once I'm holding that in place, I'm going to turn on the cold water supply stop to start the flow of water through the filtration system and into the bucket itself. Now, at this point, I'm checking this flow to see if it looks normal. Now, if the flow rate looks normal, then I can be confident that my flow issue is isolated to something within my existing faucet, and I can troubleshoot from there. However, if it still looks like I'm seeing a low flow issue into the bucket, at this point, we probably need to contact the Delta Faucet customer service team for some additional troubleshooting steps. If you're experiencing a leak at any of the connection points within your filtration system, here's a few troubleshooting tips and tricks that you can try. First and foremost, I want to stress that you do not need to be using any sort of thread tape or thread sealant on any of these connections. Next, before working on any of our leak points, let's go ahead and turn off the flow of water by shutting off both the hot and the cold supply stops. Now, the first thing I recommend doing is visually inspecting the connection point by disconnecting it. So disconnect whatever point's giving you the leak, and let's take a look at the end to make sure we don't see any debris or damage or anything else that could be causing the less than watertight seal. Now keep in mind that if this is a PEX connection, we want to make sure that the end of the PEX tubing has been cut square and is free of any burrs or nicks. If everything looks good, let's go ahead and reconnect that connection, getting it finger tight and then tightening it the rest of the way with a wrench. But keep in mind that none of these connections require more than 2 full revolutions to ensure a watertight seal. Now, if the connection point that's giving you the issue tends to be one of the ones that's going from the inlet tube or the outlet tube into the manifold, we want to make sure that we're disconnecting those like before and also visually inspecting them. Now, when you're reinstalling these, we want to make sure that the PEX line is being seated that full 5/8 of an inch into the side of the manifold before locking it in place with the blue clip. Now at this point, let's go ahead and restart the flow of water by turning on both the hot and the cold supply stops and rechecking those connections, and that should be able to solve your issue. If you're noticing a leak that seems to be originating from the cartridges or the manifold of your filtration system, here's 2 things that you can check. First, we want to stop the flow of water by turning off both the hot and the cold supply stops. We also want to make sure that we've turned the handle of the faucet that's being fed by the filtration system to the on position to relieve any sort of residual pressure that may be stuck within the lines. Once we've done that, the first thing I want to check is to confirm that both of my cartridges are fully locked into position. To do this, I can try to turn them counterclockwise until they stop. Now, if it seems like the cartridge is already fully locked into position, the next thing I want to check is the cartridge itself. So to do this, I'm going to release it from the manifold by turning it roughly a quarter turn clockwise and then gently lifting it down and off of the manifold. Now what I'm doing here is basically visually inspecting the entire cartridge, paying close attention to the top and the O-rings. Now the O-rings I want to make sure look like they're in good working order and also seated correctly. If everything looks good here, I'm going to reinstall the cartridge into the manifold and then give it roughly a quarter turn counterclockwise to fully lock it into place and confirm that the labels are facing out. Once I've done that, I can turn on both my hot and my cold supply stops and then double check to see if this has resolved the leak. If you think you're experiencing an issue with the display of your filtration system, here's 3 things to keep in mind. First, the display will only illuminate when it's either dispensing water or you press a button on the filtration system itself. After it's illuminated, it has generally about a 10-second timeout before the display shuts back off. Next, we want to check that the batteries we're using to power our filtration system are both in the correct orientation and fresh. And finally, we want to double check our power cable running from the battery pack to ensure that it's fully connected into the side of our filtration system's manifold. All right, hopefully one of those troubleshooting tips helped you out. And remember, if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to the Delta Faucet customer service team. They're more than happy to help.